The rain was coming down hard that evening. The kind of October rain that makes the whole world feel heavy and grey. I was sitting in my living room with a cup of chamomile tea that had gone cold, watching some cooking show I wasn't really paying attention to, when I heard it. A knock at the door. Not the doorbell. A knock. Weak, almost hesitant. I checked the clock. 9:15. Nobody visits at 9:15. Not at my age. Not in this weather. My heart started doing that thing it does now, racing ahead of my thoughts, jumping to conclusions about ambulances and phone calls and all the terrible ways life can change in an instant. I opened the door, and there he was. My son. My Michael. 45 years old, soaking wet, standing on my porch like a ghost. His face was swollen from crying. His clothes were rumpled like he'd been wearing them for days. And his eyes. God, his eyes. They looked like something inside him had finally broken beyond repair. "Mom," he said. Just that one word. And then he collapsed into my arms and sobbed like a child. I hadn't touched my son in 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of wondering what I did wrong. 7 years of missing my grandchildren so desperately that some mornings I couldn't get out of bed. And now here he was, broken and wet and crying on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. But I need to take you back. Because you can't understand that moment on the porch without understanding everything that came before it. My name is Lorraine, and I'm 72 years old. I raised 3 children in a small house in Pennsylvania with my husband George, who passed away 9 years ago from lung cancer. George never smoked a day in his life. The doctors said it was just bad luck. That's what they call it when they don't have answers. Bad luck. Michael was my youngest. My baby. The one who came along when I was 38 and thought I was done having children. His sisters, Karen and Beth, were already in middle school when he was born. They used to call him their living doll, carrying him around, fighting over who got to feed him. That boy grew up surrounded by women who adored him. He was sensitive in a way his father never quite understood. George loved him fiercely, but he worried about Michael being too soft for the world. I never worried about that. I thought his gentleness was a gift. I thought it would make him a wonderful husband and father someday. And he was. For a while. Michael met Jennifer during his last year of college. She was pretty in that polished way. Blonde hair always perfect, nails always done, the kind of woman who looked like she walked out of a catalog. She came from money. Her father was some kind of investment banker in New York, and she had opinions about everything. Strong opinions. I tried to like her. I really did. When Michael brought her home that first Thanksgiving, I made her mother's recipe for stuffing because Michael told me it was her favorite. She took one bite and said, "This isn't quite how my mother makes it." Then she pushed it aside. George squeezed my hand under the table. Let it go, that squeeze meant. So I did. They got married 3 years later. Big wedding on her family's property in Connecticut. I wore a dress Jennifer's mother helped me pick out because Jennifer said she wanted the wedding party to coordinate. It was uncomfortable and too expensive, but I wore it. I smiled in every photograph. I told myself this was just how things were done in her world. The grandchildren came quickly. First Emma, then 2 years later, little Jack. Those babies changed everything for me. When I held Emma for the first time, I felt a love so powerful it scared me. Like my heart had grown new chambers just to hold her. I wanted to be present. I wanted to be the grandmother who was there for school plays and skinned knees and lazy Saturday afternoons. But from the beginning, Jennifer made it clear that my involvement would be on her terms. The first time I noticed something was wrong, Emma was about 8 months old. I offered to babysit so Jennifer and Michael could have a date night. Jennifer smiled that tight smile she had and said, "We have a nanny for that, Lorraine." But thank you. A nanny. 4 date nights. When the grandmother lived 20 minutes away. I mentioned it to Michael later, gently, and he got this look on his face. Uncomfortable. Trapped. Jen just has her way of doing things, Mom. It's easier if I don't push back. Easier for who, I wanted to ask. But I didn't. The years that followed were a study in small rejections. Birthday parties where I was given the wrong time and arrived after the cake was cut. Holidays where Jennifer would change plans at the last minute, always with a reasonable excuse. Phone calls that went unanswered. Visits that got shorter and more strained. I watched my son disappear into his marriage. The sensitive boy who used to tell me everything became a man who only spoke in carefully measured sentences when Jennifer was in the room. His eyes would find mine sometimes, and I'd see something there, apology maybe or shame, but he never said the words. The breaking point came on Emma's 6th birthday. I had spent weeks making her a quilt. Hand-stitched, with fabrics from the special store in Lancaster, each square designed around things Emma loved. Butterflies, rainbows, her favorite book characters. I wrapped it in tissue paper and drove to their house with my heart full of hope. Jennifer opened the door, looked at the package in my hands, and said, "Oh, Lorraine. I wish you'd called first. We're doing a minimalist approach to gifts this year. Emma's room is already too cluttered." "It's a quilt," I said. "It folds up. It doesn't take space. It's just not what we're doing. I'm sure you understand." I stood there, holding this quilt I'd made with my own arthritic hands, and I felt something shift inside me. All the small humiliations, all the rejections I'd swallowed with a smile, they suddenly felt unbearable. "I'd like to see my grandchildren," I said. "I'd like to give Emma her gift in person." Jennifer's face changed. The polite mask slipped, just for a second. "The children are busy right now. Maybe another time. Jennifer, please. I haven't seen them in 3 months. And whose fault is that? You could call more often." "I do call. You don't answer." She stared at me, and there was something cold in her eyes. Something that had probably always been there, underneath the politeness. "Lorraine, I'm going to be honest with you. The children find your visits confusing. You have different values than we do. Different parenting ideas. And frankly, your constant need to be involved is suffocating." I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I think it's best if we take a break. Give everyone some space." "A break," I whispered. "Michael agrees. We've discussed it. You're just too much, Lorraine. It's not healthy for the kids." "Michael agrees." Those 2 words destroyed me. I drove home in a daze. I don't remember the route I took or how I got there. I just remember sitting in my driveway as it got dark, holding that quilt, crying until I had nothing left. I called Michael that night. He didn't answer. I called the next day. Same thing. I sent texts that went unread. I sent letters that were never acknowledged. I even drove to their house once, desperate, humiliated, and Jennifer met me in the driveway before I could reach the door. "If you come here again, I'll get a restraining order." "I mean it, Lorraine. Leave us alone." A restraining order. Against a 70-year-old grandmother who just wanted to see her grandchildren. The years that followed were the darkest of my life. Darker even than losing George, because at least when George died, I had my children. Now I had a wound that wouldn't close, a grief that had no funeral. My daughters were furious on my behalf. Karen wanted to hire a lawyer. Beth wanted to drive to their house and confront Jennifer directly. But I stopped them. "If we fight, Michael will have to choose," I said. "And he's already shown what choice he'll make. At least this way, there's hope that someday." Someday. That word became my prayer. Someday he'll come back. Someday he'll wake up. Someday. I filled my days as best I could. I volunteered at the church food pantry. I took up watercolors. I babysat Karen's children when she needed help, grateful for the chance to be a grandmother to someone, even as my heart broke for the grandchildren I couldn't reach. At night, I'd look at photographs. Emma's newborn pictures. Jack learning to walk. The last birthday party I was invited to, when Jack turned 2. I memorized their faces because I knew they were growing, changing, becoming people I wouldn't recognize. 7 years is a long time. Emma would be 13 now, a teenager. Jack would be 11. They wouldn't remember me. Not really. I'd become a distant memory, if I was anything at all. And then that night happened. The knock on the door. The rain. My son on the porch. Broken open. I brought him inside. Made him tea he didn't drink. Found him dry clothes from the box of George's things I'd never been able to donate. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd eaten breakfast as a child, and he told me everything. Jennifer had been having an affair. 2 years, at least. With his business partner, of all people. Michael had found out 3 months ago when he'd come home early and found them together in his own bedroom. The divorce was already in motion. Jennifer was claiming he was an unfit father, trying to take the children, trying to take everything. She's telling Emma and Jack that I'm the bad guy, he said, his voice hollow. She's turning them against me the same way she turned me against you. I listened. I didn't interrupt. This wasn't the moment for I told you so, even though some small, petty part of me wanted to say it. I was such a coward, Mom. He looked at me, and his face was a ruin of guilt. I knew what she was doing to you. I knew it was wrong. But I was so scared of her. She had this way of making me feel like everything was my fault, like if I just tried harder, loved her better, she'd be happy. And then one day I woke up and realized I'd lost you. I'd lost the kids' grandmother. I'd lost myself. Why didn't you reach out sooner? I asked. Gently, but I needed to know. I was ashamed. I let this happen. I chose her over you. Every time she said something cruel about you, I stayed quiet. Every time she cut you off from the kids, I let her. What kind of son does that? I reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were cold. A son who was being manipulated, I said. A son who was lost. He broke down again. 45 years old, my baby, crying in my kitchen like the world had ended. And in some ways it had. The world he'd built, the life he'd thought he had, it was all a lie. We talked until 3 in the morning. He told me about the years I'd missed. Emma's first day of middle school. Jack's obsession with dinosaurs that had evolved into an obsession with paleontology. The little details that Jennifer had kept from me like they were state secrets. They ask about you sometimes, Michael said. Emma especially. She remembers you. She remembers that quilt you tried to give her. My heart seized. She remembers the quilt. I hid it. Jennifer wanted to throw it away, but I kept it in my office at work. I gave it to Emma last year for her birthday when Jennifer was out of town. She sleeps with it every night. I had to leave the table. I stood at the sink and cried silently, my shoulders shaking. The weeks that followed were complicated. Michael moved into my spare bedroom while he looked for an apartment. The custody battle with Jennifer was vicious. She fought dirty, made accusations, tried everything to paint Michael as unstable. But she underestimated him. The man who showed up in family court wasn't the passive, beaten-down husband she'd controlled for years. He was fighting for his children, and he was fighting to make things right. The first time I saw Emma and Jack again, I didn't know what to expect. Michael had 1 partial custody, every other weekend, plus Wednesdays after school. He brought them to my house on a Saturday afternoon in December. Emma was tall. So tall it shocked me. She had Michael's eyes and her mother's blonde hair, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Hi, Grandma," she said, almost shy. "Hi, sweet girl." Jack hung back, uncertain. He didn't remember me at all. I was a stranger to him. The afternoon was awkward at first. Stilted. I'd imagined this reunion so many times, pictured myself sweeping them into my arms and everything being perfect. Reality was messier. They were cautious. I was nervous. We circled each other like people learning a new dance. But then Emma asked if I still had the old photo albums. The ones with pictures of Michael as a baby. I brought them out, and we sat on the couch together, and slowly, something thawed. Dad looked just like Jack, Emma said, pointing at a photograph. He did. Same serious expression, even as a toddler. Jack leaned in, curious now. That's Dad. He's so little. We spent hours looking at pictures. By the end of the afternoon, Jack was sitting in my lap, and Emma was asking if I could teach her to make my chocolate chip cookies. Healing isn't a straight line. There were setbacks. Days when the kids seemed distant, poisoned by things Jennifer had told them. Days when I felt the weight of all those lost years and wondered if the damage was permanent. But we kept showing up. Every visit, every phone call, every Wednesday after school. We rebuilt something that had been destroyed, one small moment at a time. Michael and I had hard conversations too. About his silence. About my own role in enabling Jennifer's behavior by not speaking up sooner. About forgiveness, and whether it was something you gave all at once or piece by piece. I don't know if I can ever make it up to you, he said one evening. You don't have to make it up to me, I told him. Just don't disappear again. That's all I ask. He's kept that promise. It's been 2 years now since that rainy night on my porch. The divorce is final. Michael has the children half the time. Jennifer has remarried, her affair partner, ironically enough, and from what I hear, she's unhappy. I try not to take pleasure in that. I try to be the bigger person. Most days I succeed. Emma is 15 now, all legs and eye rolls and complicated teenage emotions. She calls me twice a week, sometimes just to complain about school. Jack is 13, still obsessed with dinosaurs, and he spent last Thanksgiving helping me cook the turkey. The quilt I made all those years ago sits on Emma's bed. She told me it's her favorite thing she owns. Some nights, I still lie awake and think about the years I lost. 7 birthdays. 7 Christmases. 7 years of watching them grow through distant photographs when I should have been there in person. That grief doesn't fully heal. It becomes part of you, like an old injury that aches when the weather changes. But I've learned something in these 72 years. People are not perfect. Families break and mend and break again. The ones who love you will sometimes fail you in ways that feel unforgivable. And forgiveness itself is not a single choice but 1,000 small ones, made over and over. My son failed me. He chose his wife over his mother, his fear over his integrity. He let years pass in silence while I grieved alone. And then he came back. Broken, humbled, asking for grace he wasn't sure he deserved. I gave it to him. Not because he earned it, but because carrying that anger was killing something inside me. Because I wanted to know my grandchildren while I still had time. Because the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard was still in there somewhere, underneath all the mistakes. Last week, Jack asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I told him I wanted a painting, one of the watercolors he'd started making in art class. He brought it to me yesterday. It's a picture of a house with a big tree and 3 stick figures in the yard. At the bottom, in his messy handwriting, he wrote, "Grandma's house. My favorite place." I hung it on my refrigerator. Some things you lose. Some things come back to you. And some things are worth waiting 7 years for.